Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selena Woodruff, and this week we're going to get into emerging adulthood. So I think we should probably start off by defining what emerging adulthood is. It's kind of this newer phase in developmental psychology. And we don't want to make this too clinical, so we're just going to kind of briefly explain that it is the transition from, okay, you're 18, you're legally an adult, but you're still dependent on your parents. So that can create a really interesting situation just in terms of the development, because it's really interesting for the kids who are trying to individuate and are trying to gain their own autonomy. And it can be really interesting for the parents who have to let kids make their own decisions when they've been responsible for a lot in their lives. So we're going to break all that down and kind of walk us through it. But I thought it would be kind of interesting for each of us to share how this emerging adulthood went for us, because this is a newer thing. I would imagine, 50, 60 years ago, it was something like, okay, you're 18 now, you move out, you're on your own, and that's it. And it's different now. So Jeremiah and Selena, walk me through what this phase of life was like for you and how you experienced it.
Yeah, so it is interesting to think about, because for me, I came from the generation that was a lot more, you're 18, you graduate high school, you get out, you go to college. For us in the religion that we are a part of, I went on a mission and I never really returned home, never really depended on my parents after that. It was kind of a go be an adult. And so that's, I think, what we did.
Yeah, for me, I was still trying to kind of figure out what it is I was going to do. I knew I wanted to go to college, and I had parents that encouraged and supported that, but trying to figure that out. So I worked for a little bit and applied, and I actually ended up going to a different college than I first applied and got accepted to. And so my dad really helped me through that situation, but I loaded my stuff up in my friend's Volkswagen bus and drove from California to Utah. I think now, like, as a parent, that would have stressed me out if one of my kids just threw their stuff in a car like that. And I'm sure it did stress my parents out, but we didn't have a cell phone or anything. Her car actually even broke down. And so I don't know, we survived and we figured it out at that point, but it was great experiences actually for me to do that on my own and to figure those things out. Helped me to grow tremendously.
Which, does sound crazy. And the idea of an 18-year-old doing that today is kind of like, wow. But that's kind of what it was. And I think you guys are probably one of the last to experience that, because, I even think back to my own emerging adulthood. And so, for me, this was now 14 years ago that I, made that transition. And for me, it was a bit of a different experience. Well, really almost closer to like 15 years ago. So I graduated high school and I had a 6-month period where I wasn't in college yet, but I didn't have anything to do because I started school in January because of the school that I went to, the track system. It had a 3-track system. So I had 6 months, and my parents were very gracious and were gracious enough to just let me live at home rent free and work and save money. And they were okay doing that because, I had a plan, I had a goal, and they were perfectly willing to help me work towards that. And I was really grateful to them to let me continue to live basically free room and board for 6 months to save money for college. But even when I left for college, I still remember my dad saying, hey, we're going to go to the bank and you're going to put me on your bank account. And I think it was because he knew that I wouldn't ask him for money if I got in. Like, I was just going to go and figure it out on my own. And my dad kind of, he's like, no, I'm going to help you. And he did help me out quite a bit financially, a lot. I was fairly dependent on him my first 2 semesters of college. So for me, it ended early because I got married. And once I got married, then my dad really said, okay, c'est la vie. I mean, not that he was like, just wrote me off, but I fully transitioned into, okay, I'm an adult now. I am married, and Curtis and I are going to figure things out on our own. And not that my dad didn't still help us out some, but for the most part, we were largely able to figure things out on our own. So thankfully, it was pretty smooth for me, being still kind of reliant on my parents and, still being able to be an adult. And I think the reason why it worked is because I think it came down to just mutual respect. So I understood that my parents were doing a great service to me and helping me out while I'm in college. And my parents also understood I'm an adult, I'm going to make my decisions, and they were respectful of that. Hence, they didn't pitch a fit when I got married at 19 to a guy I'd known less than a year, right? They respected that decision as an adult. So let's kind of break that down, because that can be really hard as parents to, if you feel like your 18-year-old kid is making a huge mistake, but it's their life and you have to let them do it. So tell me your thoughts on this.
I think it's you talking about getting married and being young. I think that's a good opportunity to explain that this emerging adulthood could actually keep going into when your children are married.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that you are telling them what to do or even providing financially for them, but having that role as a partnership can continue when they are married and they are still trying to figure out things in life of cars and jobs and having families. You can be there to help and support them and be a partnership in the way that you play as a mentor and helping them with from the experiences you have had.
Yeah. So that, the emerging adult stage of development is really from age 18 to 29 is what like the American Psychological Association defines it as. But so it certainly can include marriage and other stages of life. And the thing about it is, I think some kids will transition sooner or later. Some at 18 are like, see ya, I'm out. I'm good. I know how to live my life. Our oldest child was very much that way. There's still opportunity to help and to help our children, move through those stages of adulthood. And, it's hard to say that there's a right way and a wrong way. Every child is going to be different. Every child is going to have a different experience. And I think one of the great, fantastic jobs we have as parents is sorting that out. And it's tough, right? It's tough to know when to push and when to pull and when to let go. But that's what we get to do as parents. And it's a wonderful opportunity.
Right. And so I think even about Curtis's transition, and he transitioned much more similar to the way you guys did, but that was more situational. He moved out on his 18th birthday, which was about 2 months before he should have graduated high school. And he actually didn't graduate high school because at that point he had to work and support himself and he just couldn't juggle everything. So he ended up dropping out of high school, and he also served a mission for our church, and then came home, worked for 2 years, and went to college and started college when he was 24. So, he really did become an adult at 18 and started taking care of himself, and we've been able to develop a really close relationship with both of his parents since, but it's just everybody kind of has a different experience. And like you said, Jeremiah, there's no one right or wrong way to do it. And, to be clear, I am almost 33 years old. I still call my dad for advice. I still call him and say, hey, is it 4 high or 4 low when I have to put my truck into 4-wheel drive? Like, I still call him and be like, this weird thing is going on. Why? What is happening with my vehicle right now? So, and that's one of the great things about parents is you don't just write them off when you're 18. It's, as you guys know, it's a lifelong job. And so my parents are still my parents, and they still expect me to rely on them and call on them in times of need. And I still want to do that.
Well, and maybe we should be really clear is they're still adults, even in this developmental stage. And when we look at life in general, right, we've just defined stages of development. So those stages that we go through, they're just phases, and they're things that we experience. So this emerging adulthood, they're still adults. but we're just seeing maybe a little bit longer transition. And some of those things are with relationships, with careers. When we look at even the cost of housing, kind of prohibits sometimes kids from being able to get out on their own. I call them kids, but they're adults now, right?
Yeah.
So it can be prohibitive. We have an 18-year-old son who would love to get out on his own, but he sees these prices for apartments currently, and he's like, I can't do that. There's no way. How do I, how do I afford these huge bills and be able to, develop my career and the things that I want to do? It's just a stage of development. And look, I'm in a much different stage, right? I'm pushing 50 years old here pretty soon, and I still call my dad for advice and my mom for advice about things because they have more experience than I do, not because I'm not capable. And I think that that's probably one of the things, as I've thought about this podcast for a little bit now, this topic on this podcast, is that we have to be careful as parents that we're not doing things for our children that they could do for themselves because we don't want them to have to do hard things or whatever it might be. And that really starts at a much younger age, but more specifically moving into those teen years, and then of course into emerging adults. But my children, I have 2 married children. They call us for help all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe not all the time, but maybe they just need help, with something in their home that they don't understand yet that I could help with, or, maybe they need some guidance on, navigating an insurance claim or something like that because they haven't dealt with it yet. But there we're providing guidance and partnership, not authority and direction.
That is a really good point to bring up, is this idea of transitioning from an authority figure to a partner, right? And to someone that is supportive. And it can be a really difficult transition for some parents to make. And I think it's normal for there to be a little bit of conflict there. And I don't think that parents or even kids need to stress too much if you find this conflict where, maybe if parents are struggling to relinquish control a little bit, especially if you're providing financial aid of some sort to your kids. If they're in college and maybe you're paying for their entire tuition, then, in that instance, parents maybe can say a little bit more of, well, hey, I expect you to be getting good grades. Like if I'm going to pay all this money, I expect you to have grades. That's not unreasonable. But at the same time, parents can't just micromanage their kid. Well, hey, oh, you didn't get an A on that assignment. Well, why not? You should have gotten that A. So there's got to be a balance there of authority versus supportive figure.
Well, and what we're talking about here actually is then setting appropriate boundaries, right?
Yes.
And really, this transition, Selena and I believe that really starts at early teen years, right? Of moving from this authority figure to a partnership. Now, of course, we do that slowly. We don't just say, hey, you're 13, so now we're just your partner. But we slowly transition by expanding boundaries and setting boundaries that are age appropriate to allow them to develop that autonomy and that independence from us. And then certainly that moves on through that emerging adult stage. And yeah, I mean, if you're paying for your kid to go to college, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, here's the expectation. If you got to maintain whatever GPA you feel is appropriate for them, and I'll continue paying for your school. If you don't, you're going to be on your own. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that actually will help your children to start to self-manage and be independent. And hey, I get to make this decision. Nobody's forcing me, but I get to make this decision and roll with it.
I think this gets really tricky when your kids are making choices and doing things differently in their life than you had planned.
Yes.
You have a story of what they should be doing, and when they have a different idea, it gets tricky to support that and to encourage them. So if we just really go back to thinking about that relationship that we want to have with them and that connection that we have talked about previously as a teenager, it continues in with that. So allowing them to make those choices and allowing them to decide and make decisions helps them to learn and grow and helps them to be who they are wanting to be.
Yeah, and Selena, I love that focus on maintaining the connection, because I think as parents, that's the ultimate goal. Is you want your kid to grow and you want them to develop, you want them to live their own lives, but you still want to be involved in their life. One of my favorite marriage quotes that I've come up with is, Parents very much belong in your life. They do not belong in your marriage. Your parents have no business being in your marriage, but you want them in your life. You want them to be involved. You want to talk to them. You want to get together with them, but don't bring them into the relationship. And so I think that's the goal as parents, is to be able to have a good enough relationship that our kids still want to come home to us for holidays. They still want to come visit. We all want to get together for birthdays, for, Thanksgiving, like the big holidays. And I think that there is a way to do that. And also expect bumps, expect conflict. It is just a normal part of life. I would imagine that you have had some conflict with your older children. I certainly experienced conflict with my parents as we were all navigating this idea of, well, I'm going to be an independent adult now and I have to make my own choices. But, you still feel like mom and dad. Conflict is okay in that instance. Okay, let's take a quick break and we will be right back.
Create Harmony is a podcast about setting an intentional rhythm and savoring God's blessings. In this place, we'll take a few minutes to celebrate everyday joys and remind ourselves how to notice goodness that is all around us. During the winter at Create Harmony, we shift our focus to all things cozy and snuggly. And while our days are shorter and darker, we stay attuned to the things that help us reset and restore. At the start of this new year, our podcast is filled with winter self-care as well as ways to declutter and clear your mind. Check it out.
So here's my best advice I give to parents with adult children, and I try to use it in my own life, and I've seen that it's really helped. When your kid calls you, you say, "Do you want me to listen or do you want me to give advice?" Because I've learned that sometimes they just need to complain. They need to let it out. They need to, and it helps. I know for me too, it helps to just kind of get it out. And then you start seeing and are able to problem solve or see solutions in that, or you just need somebody to listen to the troubles you're having. But sometimes they do want advice and they're not sure what to do or which direction in that. So I find that if I can have that focus and that attitude, it helps me to build that relationship with my children instead of me dictating and forcing my opinion or telling them and giving them all of my advice if that's not what's wanted at that point.
And I really love that advice, because as parents, and sometimes more especially as men, maybe I'm stereotyping a little bit here, we want to fix things, right? Even in a husband-wife relationship, a man will often not listen to his wife, but try and solve her problems, right? And it's hard for us. And so we're used to fixing. So as soon as they start saying, well, I'm having this trouble, well, you need to do this and you need to do that, and we can do this. Well, that really isn't very helpful when that's not what they're looking for. Sometimes they just want to be listened to. And I love that Selena shared that, because it certainly builds connection, and it certainly allows them the space to do what they want to do. And they're going to trust coming to you more. And like you said, Liz, like we want our kids to have that connection. I want my kids to call me when they're in the middle of something tough and say, what do I do here? Or I want them to call me and say, you'll never believe what I've had to deal with, and be able to share that with me, because we want that connection. We want those relationships to grow and last throughout a lifetime, not just until our children turn 18.
Yeah, your parents never stop being your parents, and your kids never stop being your kids. And I've certainly felt that in my own life as because I have my own family now, and, but I still feel very connected to my parents, and I still want them in my life. And so I'm really grateful that we've been able to develop that relationship. So give me some tips and some ideas on how we can help our kids build or develop those life skills. So, you guys have done this at least 3 times now, correct? Because you have 2 married children and then you have an 18-year-old kiddo. So give me just your tips and your tricks on how to just help children develop into resilient and self-sustaining adults that don't still need mom and dad to do everything for them when they are, 18 years old.
Well, I think ours are pretty independent and self-sustaining despite our best efforts. So, we certainly haven't done it perfect, but I really believe that a lot of this starts at a very young age. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this topic, and one of the things that they said is, well, what kind of chores do we have today? When he and I were kids, like, there were just heavier chores that had to be done. I grew up in a home. We didn't have a furnace that heated the main living part of our home. We had it for our bedrooms, but not the rest of our home. We had a wood burning stove in the wintertime, and we had to cut wood, right? My dad would tell us all summer long, you boys better get out there and cut the wood and split it and stack it, get ready, or you're going to be doing it in the wintertime. Of course, we'd never, ever listen. And we'd be outside in the snow and the cold, cutting wood, freezing and upset. And he would always say, I told you to get it done and you didn't listen, right? So we had these chores that were required to be done. And we seem to have moved more away from that. We don't want our kids to have chores. We overschedule them. We put them in dance and karate and this club and that club and this activity and this sport and that sport. And they don't have any time. And so we do everything for them. But I really believe that it starts at a young age, and we start giving age appropriate chores at a very young age. And they learn those life skills, right? They learn how to wash dishes. They learn how to cook a meal. They learn how to safely use different things like a vacuum cleaner or a drill or something of that nature, right? We involve them in those responsibilities. In fact, our 18-year-old son, there was a time that he started to believe that dad can't do anything. He depends on me for everything. And we chuckled and laughed. And I said, son, that has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with teaching you the responsibility and the skills to do things around a home and for your own life. Now, if we've moved into this phase and we're at 19, 20 years old and we still haven't taught them anything, my tips and tricks would be start teaching. And it's okay. Yeah. And we start going through that process. We teach them how to budget, how to go grocery shopping, how to wash your clothes and care for yourself. And we teach them about hygiene and things like that if we haven't. So these are things that really happen throughout the lifespan of children, right? And again, if we didn't teach them all those things, it's okay. And we probably won't teach them everything. They can call us and we can help. Yep. And our world it's getting smaller all the time. And with all the technology, the connections are simpler, right? Dad, how do I check the oil again on my car? I don't remember. Yep. Well, let's jump on FaceTime and I'll show you real quick. It's super simple. Those are my tips.
Well, it might be repetitive, but my answer is it starts when they're 3 years old, emptying the dishwasher, putting the silverware away. What are they capable and able to do at certain times? When your 8-year-old is hungry and says she's hungry, and I say, you are capable of making a sandwich.
Yep.
So really it's building that self-confidence for them and them knowing and realizing that they are capable of doing things. Yes, that's a lot of messes to have to clean up, or taking the time to teach is sometimes gets tricky in our busy lives, right? But finding those opportunities to build their confidence throughout their life that they are capable and able to do those household tasks. Another thing that I've found that has worked for us over the years, which is just a tip. Each kid has a night that they're in charge of dinner. So one, it solves I don't like eating that, because they get their night and they get to decide, right? Yep. And it's changed and evolved over the years, and sometimes it works better than other times, but they, at a young age, they get to pick, but then they can help cut the vegetables or help stir things. So as they get older, and I have loved watching how my children, even our 18-year-old son, he's able to make dinner all on his own now. He picks and then he makes dinner. So not that that's something you have to do, but that just helps you see that you're able to give them those opportunities through their life. And as they grow, how that responsibility can change in different ways. And it gives them that skill. And then it gives them that confidence that they're able to see that they are capable of doing things.
Yeah. And always remember, for those listening, like, just because it worked in our home doesn't mean it'll work in yours. You've got to find the things that are going to be best for you and your family, and however you manage that, that's okay. These are just ideas to help your thoughts move. And I realize that we keep kind of bouncing back to youth and to teenagers and moving kind of out of this emerging adults topic. But so much of it for us starts there. And again, if you haven't done those things, it's not lost. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We can resolve those things. People are resilient. We can teach and grow. I think one of the struggles that parents really have in that emerging adult age is they kind of lose this control factor, right? We're used to
Yes.
being able to control our children. Well, now they're 18, they're going to make the choices they're going to make. And we don't have as much say in that, especially if they've moved out, right? It gets to be difficult. But again, we want to focus on the relationship and that connection. And then we set healthy boundaries and work within that to help them develop and move into that stage to help them figure out what kind of relationships, what kind of career they want. Do they want to go to college or go a different route for a career? All of those different things, if we can make sure that we develop that connection, we're so much more effective at being a partner and having that influence to help them make their decisions. And we also want to be really careful here not to suggest that we are pushing them one way, because we know that it's best for them if they become an engineer rather than a plumber, right? Like, we have to support them in the direction that they want to go. They need to live their life and they need to do the things that they want to do. So we can, use different tools of goal setting and things like that to help them explore what they want, but being careful not to try and force them down a road that we think that they should go down.
Another way to help with that transition and to move more into a supportive role is to ask questions, not tell them. So like, hey, what time are you getting up for your dentist appointment?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, you have a dentist appointment today, you got to get up at 8:00. Why are you still asleep? So just shifting maybe still what you think or expect into a question so they have ownership over that, and allowing them to make that choice and them decide how they're going to handle that.
That is a really great idea to help, or giving them ownership. And, I want to kind of reiterate here about finding what works within your family. So my parents, when I got my driver's license, obviously part of the expectation is I was going to help shuttle people around was part of that deal, right? So like, they didn't make me buy my own car. They also never made me pay for my own gas. Throughout all of high school, they kept my tank full. They always paid for my gas, but they also recognized I didn't have time for a job. I was really involved in extracurricular activities, and I was involved in so much stuff that I genuinely did not have time. And I appreciate that my parents giving me that freedom to explore and to pursue my interests in high school, and supporting me in that. And so, again, it's what works within your family. Some parents, it's like, nope, you need to get a job, or you need to pay for your own gas, you need to pay for your own things. There's no one right way to do it. There's no right or wrong. There's what works for your family and what works for your kid and each individual kid, right? My parents didn't let my younger brother get his license until he was like 18. So, again, it's just every kid is different, and you have to just kind of find and explore what's going to work for your family dynamic.
Yeah, I love that you reiterated that, because that is super important. And different families are going to do things differently, and our children can learn through different types of experiences and different ways of exploring. One kid might really just need, hey, you're responsible for your gas, your insurance, your car. If you want to drive, that might be the right thing. Mm-hmm. And for you, that wasn't the right thing, and it needed to go a different direction. And we would support that 100%.
Yeah. Yep. There's no one right way to be a parent. And I think that's what sometimes parents can get hung up on. I have to do it this way, or it has to go this way. It doesn't. We know that there are wrong ways. There are wrong ways to parent, but it's usually around abuse and neglect, or control, which is a form of abuse. So, those are kind of the wrong ways. But in terms of just the right way, I think as long as your kid is growing, they're healthy, they're developing, you're doing it. You are doing the parenting thing right. And, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be shortcomings. Everybody's going to make mistakes, and welcome to life.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up if you've made mistakes as parents, because we
Yep.
all have. It's really okay, and we've mentioned that multiple times today, and in other podcasts. Like, children are resilient; they'll bounce back from those things, and there's still opportunity to connect and develop and grow.
Oh, maybe I should
absolutely.
share. Maybe I should share some of my fails, since I shared all of my, oh, I do this so wonderful and this works.
We probably have a lot more examples of failures than successes, but people tend to want to hear what worked and what helped them. Maybe they want to hear more failures. I
Maybe
don't know.
we should do a whole podcast on our fails.
On parenting fails.
Ooh, that might be exciting.
I don't know. Could it be down to one episode?
I don't think it
one
could.
episode? It might be an interesting episode. I mean, because I don't know, it's just, it can be so easy to carry the parent guilt. I mean, guilt it can be really high for parents. My parents still, or my mom still's like, I'm so sorry for the way this went as when you were a kid. And I'm like, Mom, it's okay. Really. I'm okay. Like, you don't have to beat yourself up for this. So,
Here,
all
let me offer you a thought for that.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly what my kids need.
Yeah. Yep.
Whether it's good or bad, they're going to learn from it, right?
They absolutely are. And I learned so much from my parents, and I've shared this before. My parents taught me a lot of what not to do in marriage. And, my parents had a very high conflict marriage when I was growing up. And I looked at that and said, I want the opposite of that. And that's what I found. And that's what I did. I learned what not to do. And I have, created a wonderful, beautiful marriage. I mean, I struggle with the idea of low conflict, because I feel like you have conflict every day, but conflict doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, right? My marriage is just, it's wonderful, and I love my marriage. And I'm grateful to my parents for showing me what not to do.
Yeah, no, conflict in marriage is actually a good thing. The real question is how is the conflict handled? How is it resolved? How is the communication within that conflict? Because if there's no conflict, then typically what we're going to see is somebody's always giving in and not really expressing their needs or their desires or their wants within the relationship. So, and it's good for our kids to see the conflict, and it's good for them to see the way we handle the conflict, the way we resolve it. If we're shouting and yelling and swearing and calling names, or becomes physically abusive as well, like those are awful and terrible things.
Yes.
We don't want to go that direction. But when we have conflict and we're able to communicate and work through that conflict and come to a happy solution for both sides, then our children are seeing good things. And when we look at emerging adults and their relationships, of course, the best ideal is that we want to model good relationship behavior, right? What is healthy in a relationship and what isn't, and we want to teach that to our kids. And sometimes we teach it through the bad choices that we make, because guess what? We're not perfect in our relationships either. And so, we can always learn. We can learn what we don't want, and we can learn what we do want from different types of relationships and people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Next week, we are going to get into talking to kids about sexuality. Really important topic. It's been a while since we've hit this one, and it's going to be really interesting to discuss it with Jeremiah and Selena. This is certainly a topic that I have done with Lindy Burton in the past, so I'm excited to get a new and different perspective, and we will see you all next week. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.